Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered Therapist podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Gozansky, and I'm really happy that you're joining me here today. Today's guest on our podcast is the multifaceted Jamie Vollmoeller. Jamie wears multiple hats with great finesse, juggling between her roles as a licensed clinical social worker, EMDR therapist, owner of Long Island EMDR, and co-owner of Brave Counseling and Psychiatry. And when I say juggling, I really mean it. She is popping in here in the middle of an EMDR intensive just to record this episode.
That is true.
Jamie is a voice of insight and empathy as she hosts the highly relatable podcast, Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. She helps parents break cyclical patterns of trauma, advocating for a balance between caring for themselves and others. We are going to talk about the tough but rewarding jobs of being a mom, a therapist, and an entrepreneur. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Sydney. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy that we could arrange this. I love that you've listened to my podcast. I've listened to your podcast. So we've got a mutual fan club going. Yeah. And as you know, my favorite question to ask to start off is, what does being a heart-centered therapist mean to you?
Oh, goodness. So for me, being a heart-centered therapist, I think when I think heart-centered, I think authentic and empathic, right? Um, I'm so glad we can edit this because now I'm phrasing. Being a heart-centered therapist for me means being authentic and an empath. Um, at its core for me, it's about being relatable, right? And to our clients and being authentic about who we are. As a trauma kid myself, so I specialize in trauma work. I love working with moms and people with imposter syndrome because it's my own stuff, right? And I think that I've been in a lot of therapy in my life, and I had a lot of therapists that were not great, just not great. They were not they didn't challenge. They were validating, but like it instilled this feeling of like hopelessness
Mhm.
because yes, everything in your life is chaotic and oh yeah, you have no control and these things are happening to you and just getting validation and not getting the like challenging of where are you in this? Where is your role and everything? Um, Made me feel hopeless as a client as a
Mhm.
kid until I had a therapist that was more my style. She's a blunt therapist. So she's like more of she's validating and she's caring and she's compassionate and she shows up for you and she's there, but she calls you on your nonsense and does it in a loving way. Because if you don't have that insight, if you don't have someone calling you out and they're just co-signing, we don't make any growth. So for me, heart-centered is about doing the best interest for my clients, being authentically me, showing up as me. Like I don't pretend to have my, can I say shit?
Yes.
Okay, I don't pretend to have my shit together. For my clients, like they know if I'm having a hard time, and I don't have a poker face, Sydney. Like you can read it on my face. I'm just one of those, right? I'm very lucky that I've worked with clients long enough that when people tell me sad things like that, I can stay mindful because I think that's really important to not make people feel like, oh, poor you, because I know it's a trigger for me. But I also think it's like if they say something, if you have a client come in and they're like, like my husband did this thing again. And when you're like in that with that client where you feel that groove of like, oh, he did it again, like that
Right.
camaraderie. Oh. I think it's just about like being real with people and that makes them feel connected to you because they feel like they can trust you because you're not wearing a mask. And I found for my clients that when I take the mask off and I be myself and like don't pretend to have it together, they feel 10 times more comfortable doing that as well and not hiding all of the things that they feel guilty and shameful and bad about. And working with a lot of parents and moms, um, we have a lot of shame sometimes about how we conduct ourselves, like that we yelled at our kids or that we, forgot this big event, and we hold all that in because we don't want people to judge us. But when you come across as like, oh yeah, I've done that too, like I feel like there's just this weight that leaves the room of like, oh, okay, we could just be ourselves here. If that
Yeah.
does not make sense, I'm sorry,
It
that was a long
does.
one.
This is no, it's long and it's so good. And I'm just like, yes. So you want to hear more from Jamie because this is so spot on, right? I got the warm fuzzies, like just feeling how relatable you are and that we could take our mask off. And yes, like when we just get in that groove with our clients, and like, oh, really? He did that again, right?
Yeah.
Like that sense of being relatable is such an important part of a heart-centered therapy approach. And I love that. And I really also want to acknowledge you for what you described about needing to have that gentle confrontation or being called on your shit. And you know what? That's a really high level therapy move, right? That's some skill that takes a while to learn to deliver it in a way that's in the best interest of your client. And you had a great therapist and you took lessons from her, and now you're rocking it too.
Well, and I think when I first started out as a therapist too, right? Because most of us therapists, I really feel like almost every person I know that's a therapist that got in this field, we did it because we want to help people. Most of us are hardcore people pleasers and we like neglect our own needs, and we're like, oh, my stuff is bad, but if I focus on everyone else's, then that makes me feel good and I'll just ignore all my stuff.
Right. There's so many truth bombs right there. Most of us are hardcore people pleasers in this field.
We are. But
Yeah.
then what happens when I was I doesn't for my employees. For me as a therapist, I feel like because I had a therapist that confronted me and challenged me and was like, what's your role? Even at 14, 15, 16, she's like, yeah, okay, the situation sucks, but like, can you go get a job? Can
Mm,
you schedule more stuff outside of the house? Can you focus on how you're going to make your life better when you get out of here and what is in your control right now? And that made me feel better. So I always took that into therapy with me. But being a supervisor of clinicians, who are also hardcore people pleasers, I've had to work with my clinicians when they first come on, a lot of them on, I know that you're worried this client feels hopeless and you don't want to say like, yeah, but this is your role. But you're
mm,
telling me that. And how are they going to change it if you don't have that like that warm confrontation with them of like, hey, I know this feels hopeless, but have you ever thought about what if you change just this one piece? One of the things that with the people pleasers, in the core beliefs we tend to have is I'm not good enough and I'm responsible.
mm,
Every people pleaser I know resonates with those two. What we tend to forget is the I'm alone, right? And I feel like when we think about people pleasers, most people don't think I'm alone because we're surrounded by people, right? We don't
right.
think
And
that consciously.
yeah, and we always have somebody else in front of us that we have to please. So we don't really feel that alone, except that we are.
We are alone because what comes down to it, and doing EMDR, love it because it just changes the way that our brain makes connections. It's great. But I've realized that at the core for most of these people is this feeling of I'm alone. And it's not truly alone, like there's no one around me. It's I'm alone. I can't ask anyone for help. I can't get my feelings and needs met. If I even ask, I'm going to be shamed, guilted, put down in some way. So it's not safe. So they keep operating in this place of like, I can't get my feelings and needs met and chronically feeling not good enough. But the problem at the root of it is these people are not telling people what they feel, how they feel, or what they need, and they're not setting boundaries or asking for that help. And they're expecting the people around them that they do everything in the world for to just know what they need and what they want, right? And do it for
Right.
them. And then when they don't, it's like, well, no one does it for me, so I must really not be good enough. Or my feelings and needs really don't matter because they're not addressing them. And it's like, but are you telling them to anyone? Are you
Right.
telling anyone
Right.
what's going on with
But then
you?
the
Or
shame cycle takes over and you can't tell.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
really like at the core, it's like learning like as a child, we might have felt alone. We might have had a single mom or a parent with mental illness or a sibling that had mental health or medical issues that you were very responsible for, right? And you might have had to really step up and hold the whole house together and be the strong one because no one else was going to do it. But as an adult, you don't got to do that, right? And I
Yes.
think that's like that's what I love about what we do is helping people realize that what our brains tell us, our thoughts are
Mhm.
just thoughts. They're not based in fact. They might have been a fact in 1995, but they're not a fact in 2023.
Right.
So
Yes. That's so beautiful, Jamie. And it's really it's such an eloquent and relatable way of explaining how like we help our clients see that they have options, expand their range of options and possibilities, right, in life. And that's so important. And I resonate so much with what you're saying about the aloneness, especially for you as an EMDR and trauma therapist, and I do trauma work. And somebody had recently shared like part of the core of what we do is undoing aloneness. And I love that phrase, undoing aloneness, right? Like that just kind of, it hits, right?
yeah,
It hits like what is so much a part of our work as therapists and what we need to do more as human beings in our world.
yeah, it's helping people learn how to build meaningful relationships and connections, right? It's that attachment repair that's really
Yeah.
the core of therapy. Like we are that ideal relationship where they can come in and you can cuss me out and you can say, I'm fucking pissed. What you told me to do last week didn't work, or we did a session and I
Right.
had nightmares for 2 days and I'm pissed at you. And I'll be like, that really sucks. And I empathize and I'm here and I'm going to support you. And it's okay to be frustrated with me. And I validate the fact and I appreciate the fact that you are coming to me with your feelings. And my clients are like, oh, okay. And then they immediately calm down because
We
they're
calm
not
down.
used to that. We are that holding space or that healing relationship where people learn how to relate and feel connected and not alone.
Yes. And you see them and you give them that permission to be themselves, which you model for them as a very kind of like, no mask therapist, which is so great.
No
Yeah.
mask. Just
Right.
I couldn't if I tried, Sydney. I have
Mm-mm.
tried. And it's written on my face. It's in my tone. It's in the hesitation when I go to when I go to say the nice thing, like even the white lies,
Mm.
when
Yeah.
you go to just placate people, like I always hesitate. I'm not a good liar. So I just have to be me, or it comes across as so much more inauthentic, even if I'm trying to be helpful, that I'm like, I'm just gonna embrace who I am. And the people who like me will like me, and the people who don't. And
Hmm.
as therapists, I think it's really important for us to remember that you're not going to be a perfect therapist for every client.
100%.
Right?
Right.
It's okay to be you and then be like, oh, my approach might be a little too um pushy, I guess is the
Hmm.
word. I don't know, like confrontational for every client. And that might not work for every client. Some people might need that really warm a million validations before they're ready to let that guard down.
Right. They may not be
People,
ready yet.
yeah, but those aren't my tribe. My tribe are
Mhm.
the hardcore, want to make a change, have insight on my behavior. I'm tired of doing the same thing all the time, and I just want you to tell me, help me figure out my crazy life and come up with a strategy to fix it. Like those are the people I enjoy working with.
Yeah.
So why modulate who I am to accommodate a client that's not going to be an ideal fit for me? Because I'm not
Mhm.
going to do all this work with that client either.
Exactly. And Jamie, that just shows that like you will work with really hard clients because they're the ones that bring, right, all of this to you and say, plop it on your lap. Now, what do I do now? But they're open to having that guidance and to trying things with your validation and all of that.
Yeah. So I don't I love challenging cases.
Yeah,
For me, like a clinical puzzle. It's like,
me
ooh,
too.
this happened here and this happened here. And how do we weave all this together and undo that famous therapy picture of the ball of yarn and
Mm,
the therapist is unraveling it.
right.
That's really what we're doing with those complex cases. And as an entrepreneur, when I started out, I used to see 40 clients a week. I'm a workhorse. I've always been a workhorse. I think it's a New Yorker thing. I don't know. Um, maybe it's a trauma kid thing. Maybe it's
I think it's a little of all those things. Yeah.
a generational immigrant thing. I don't know. I
Yes.
got to work
Yes.
ethic, girl. But
Hmm.
now I don't get to see as many clients because I have so many other responsibilities. So if I'm going to work with people, I want them to be a challenge. I want to learn.
Oh,
I want
I'm
to.
right there with you. I'm right there with you because I mean, we're going to talk about you have two group practices, one group practice with two locations, and then another group practice that you co-own, which is in an entirely different state. So like that's crazy. But I'm just with you too. I have a small group practice, but I'm also like seeing clients, but then I have to like cut back on my clients and I don't want to completely do that. And so then the clients I have, I want them to be the challenging, really inspiring clients to work with. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you. And I think that the hard part about being a group owner, right, is balancing the many different hats that you have to wear. And I know for me that honestly, again, I'm a very open person, guys. So this is a hard year for us. Like it was a hard year for me personally. It was a hard year in the business. Like we had a lot of staff turnover. We made a lot of like policy changes
Sure.
that maybe
Yeah.
everyone was in agreement with. But it also was a really big learning year. And I was feeling so burnt this year. And even this week, like I'm coming up on changing over benefits packages and compensation structures and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I felt like I was drowning this week, girl. But to
Yeah.
be fair, my team, my clinical director is 8 months pregnant.
Oh my
And
gosh.
um, yeah, I love her. She's my first hire, Alexandria Baxter. She's phenom. But she, is super pregnant and on her during her pregnancy, she can't take her medication that usually helps her manage her anxiety. And when I'm super stressed, I talk a million miles a minute
Mhm.
and it drives the girl nuts. So I'm like, I can't go to Alex because I can't put this on her. She's pregnant. It's not,
Right.
I can't do it to
Too
her.
much.
And then my operations director, who's my other like helps me run the day to day, just had a baby in September and
Oh
she doesn't come
wow.
back till January. So I'm like, God, I'm on a lone island over here. Um, and and I really was thinking about like what made this year so hard for me.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
was doing all the tasks that like aren't the reason I went into business. Like I went into business because I love the clinical picture. I love working with clients. I love learning. I love teaching. I love supervising.
Oh, we're like cut from the same cloth, Jamie. All those things. I love those things too. And I wish my listeners could see you. This is one drawback of the podcast. Jamie smiles the whole time she's talking. Like she's so passionate. So it's
I
so refreshing.
and I think, so this week I was getting into that because this week I decided that I'm not going to be like the only one running it anymore. And I'm
Mhm.
going to do a profit share with the girls that have been around for a long time that help me run things. And I am handing off I'm handing off payroll, I'm handing off billing, I'm handing off scheduling, I am handling off like the weekly supervision. And I plan on doing like group supervision and
Oh my
EMDR
gosh.
consultation for the practice. And I'm just going to see my clients, do intensives, and
Mhm.
focus on like being the trainer that I want to be. And since I made that decision, I'm like, I just feel so much freer. Now, there's a million things I'm going to have to do in the next 3 weeks before I can actually breathe to
To,
set that plan in motion.
to
But
make
it's
that happen and to
good to know,
delegate.
like, you can get your feelings and needs met. And that's why I'm also passionate about the work I do because I see a therapist. All of you therapists out there need to see a therapist. If you aren't seeing a therapist, you're not going to be doing your best work because our stuff comes up all the time.
All the time, all the time. Such great advice. She is dropping it today. And I'm going to talk to you after this show because of learning how to delegate. I have to do the very same thing you just said. So
Oh,
we'll
girl, hit me
connect.
up after and I will
Ah,
give you tips and tricks. My business partner, Elizabeth, in my business in Missouri, that's Brave. So I guess we should kind of probably, so Brave Counseling and Psychiatry is an individual therapy practice, and they also provide medication management. in Missouri. They're in Columbia, Missouri, which is
Mhm.
a very progressive little town in a very red state. Um,
Oh, okay.
so it's interesting. I loved Brave because in Missouri, there are very few practices that are loud and proud LGBT, loud and
Mm,
proud like anti-abortion, like women's issues, like, and that's my girl
wow.
Liz. She was like, no, we're gonna be the practice that's like, we don't agree with any of this stuff, which in a state that's that red
Yeah.
is really hard. Like for me as a New Yorker, that's just kind of like how everyone feels around here. We're like, you don't feel that way. But in Missouri, that's a very big shift from the dominant culture there. So I
Right.
love that team. They're so passionate about the people that they serve and being diverse and accepting of like all people. We have a psychiatric nurse practitioner there that's part of the
Great.
Muslim community who actually
Wow.
is going to go for EMDR training, just because of everything that's happening right now in Palestine and how
Mhm.
traumatizing it is for her community and wanting to be the people that help. And that's also what I love about both of my businesses. The people that we hire are passionate people.
Yeah,
They're
it's
in
so
this
beautiful.
they're in this because they love the people they work with. And I think they stay with us because under the trauma umbrella, I really feel like all mental health is trauma.
Hmm.
Like if you didn't experience something, right, you're probably not feeling depressed or anxious or any of that stuff.
Right.
Um, and having everyone focus in on their like specialty within trauma. So Aisha
Hmm.
wants like refugees and war zone stuff. And I have a clinician, Seth, who's super focused on religious trauma. Shout out to Seth Showalter. He wrote a book called Finally Free, A Surrender to Authenticity. It's about his journey through conversion therapy.
Oh,
It's his actual journal from when he was in conversion therapy and his
wow.
reflections now as a therapist. It's an
Wow.
amazing read. Um, so we have some really awesome people on my team who are all super
Yes.
passionate about what they're passionate about. And I think what makes us different is we're okay with that. We're
Hmm.
like, everyone should work with the people that they're going to do the best work with
I
because it lights
agree.
up. And our clients, because if we're really being our authentic selves and we've been through this before, like how beneficial is that for your clients to have a therapist that is a gay man that had to go through conversion therapy and struggle with religious trauma, and that's exactly what you're struggling with? Like, oh my God, it's so much easier to let that mask down, right?
Bingo. Yeah, exactly. And, Jamie, that is just goes right back to that sense of being heart-centered, being relatable, and showing up for your clients without pretense. We're not talking about without boundaries, but without like just bringing what you can from your experience and your training to the table. And look at that. Like that's amazing what your colleague Seth does. So I'm sure
Yeah,
people are going to want to read his book. That's so cool.
check him out. He's great. But yeah, that is so part of being heart-centered is just showing up and doing the work you're passionate about. And I think, I don't know for you, Sydney, but that's part of why I started a private practice because I didn't want to treat everyone under the sun. Like working in a clinic, they'd give you people with schizophrenia, they give you people
Mhm.
with, all of these massive, multifaceted issues. And I'd have 70 clients on my calendar in the week.
Yeah.
There's
Wow.
no way to be the best therapist when you're doing a multitude of issues. You cannot be skilled in every area. And I think I just felt better when I focused on the things that I knew I liked working with and interest me, because then
Hmm.
I liked learning about it. And then if all my clients are generally the same type of person, it makes it easier to feel like, oh, wow, I'm doing really good work and not feel so like, oh, I don't know what to do in this situation because I've never dealt with someone with active hallucinations or whatever.
Right,
Like,
exactly. And when you feel better about your work, then we have less burnout. We have more satisfaction with our work, with our jobs, less burnout. And then we start to connect also with colleagues who are in similar places, and I really see that you are also a heart-centered leader because look at these colleagues that you draw to your group practices, right? That's amazing. And it really says a lot. And I know you said before, like, you're just straight up who you are, but this took a while, Jamie. Like you said, you write on your website, She puts this on her website, guys. As a woman who has struggled with imposter syndrome most of my life and feeling not good enough in just about every department, motherhood, as a partner, as a boss, as an employee, as a friend, legit, you name it, I am beyond passionate about the transformative healing that takes place in EMDR.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first off, everything you just said makes us think like, what? You cannot be an imposter because you are so good and real at what you do. But this is the truth, right? We feel these different things.
It's so true. And most of the successful people I have talked to have like this feeling of I'm a fraud, I'm gonna be found out, right? When I started my group practice, I'd never supervised everyone. I'd never even been in a management role. I was terrified. And I was like, okay, well, you're a good clinician and you're just going to study and do the best you can and just learn to overcome and power through and get there. But yeah, the reason I'm like really passionate about EMDR is
Hmm.
because I do EMDR. When I went to the EMDR training, because I think this is why I am so like explains why I'm so passionate, right? Because I feel like people go to that training and if you don't get any personal connection with it or feel any sort of change, it is intensive, really protocol-based work that
Hmm.
you're probably not going to buy into unless you feel the change, right?
Yes.
So for me, I went when I was pregnant with my second son. My first child was about 2.5, but we had to do IVF. I knew from
Oh.
18 I was going to have issues having kids.
Mm.
So then, of course, as soon as someone tells you you're going to have issues having kids, I was like, I want to be a mom. That's all I ever wanted to be in my whole life was a mom.
Oh.
And we had to do IVF, and it was very, very stressful. And his whole pregnancy, even though like I had never miscarried, I had never had like, they never figured out why I had infertility issues.
Mm.
Just felt like, what if something happens? And what if this doesn't go well? And I'm going to have to go through that horrible experience of
Mm.
if ladies, if you have not been, or and gents, because therapists aren't only females, obviously, but if you haven't been through IVF or know anyone that's been through that process, it is highly traumatic. There's
Yeah.
actually studies that show that women struggling with infertility have like the same levels of like PTSD as cancer patients. Because if
Mm.
you think about this, guys, as women, we are told that our worth is based on our ability to be moms, pretty
Right.
much, right?
Yeah.
To be moms. And if you can't be a mom, it's like, okay, your partner is disappointing with you, you're disappointing yourself, your whole life picture is shattered, your family, well, and friends, well-meaning or not, like I know for a lot of women, they'll get like, oh, when are you trying? When are you trying? I
Right.
wish people would stop asking that
Yeah.
because it was like a dagger in the heart every
Oh,
time someone would say to me, like, oh, when are you guys going to have kids? It's like, well, I wish Jesus would tell me because I don't know.
right.
Like
Exactly.
not for lack of trying.
Yeah.
So
And it's so
I,
gutting, and then people ask you these inappropriate questions all the time, or like, do you have kids? Or,
yeah, and it's really, really hard. So I went for my EMDR. I'm sorry, guys. I'm also ADHD, so I'm kind of all over the place. But I went for my EMDR training when I was like only a month pregnant with my second son. So we had just gone for IVF. It just took and I just found out, but I had all of that same like dread of like, what if something happens? And I couldn't still let myself relax. And I did my training with my partner on my infertility issues and feeling like my body is broken, I think was my negative belief. And in the training, it went from like me and all of my anxieties about the pregnancy and what could go wrong. And then what happened is my brain flashed forward all of these beautiful positive images about carrying my first son and him latching immediately, like when I went to
mm,
breastfeed him, and the bond that we have, and the fact that I was able to have like a pretty healthy pregnancy with him and he came out healthy and fine and okay. And that pregnancy, guys, I was so much less anxious. Like I didn't ruminate. I wasn't like up all night worrying about what could happen. Like it was just like, oh, well, that's a thought, and I could dismiss it. And before that, therapy used to feel to me like I have all these coping skills and tools and strategies to whack down these thoughts and argue with them and try to make myself feel differently. But I never felt differently. So the thoughts would just keep coming up,
Yeah.
and it becomes like you're a hamster on a wheel, just like
Mhm.
replaying the same things, or like playing whack-a-mole. Like the thought comes up, you go, that's not true because of this. You knock it down, and then another thought comes up, knock it
Yeah.
down, and it comes up. And it just feels so mentally draining. You're fatigued, you're tired, you're just run down. And I feel like if you haven't experienced anxiety, it's hard for people to understand that chronic stress feeling of, I can't get my body to calm down. My muscles are chronically tight. My chest is just tight. My everything just feels so off, and my brain won't shut off. I've
Right.
I don't know if you've ever had anyone say to you, have you struggled with anxiety ever, Sydney?
Yes, absolutely, I have. So as you're saying that, I know exactly what you're describing. And as you describe that, it's like that's untenable, unsustainable for a pregnant woman, right? And so it's amazing how life-changing that was for you to have that EMDR experience.
And not just for me, for
Mhm.
my children, right? Because there
Yeah.
was a major difference in how my firstborn Michael came out the womb. Like, he's anxious. He could not be put down. That
Oh,
baby was carried in a wrap for 10 months. He's a beautiful, smart kid, but
right.
I swear he is me through and through. He'll be
You
okay
picked
because his
that up.
mom's okay. But
Yeah.
when he came out, my second, he gets anxious, but the level of anxiety between my firstborn and my secondborn
Mhm.
is notable. And I think that's because my first pregnancy, my cortisol levels were through the freaking roof.
Right.
In my second pregnancy, I wasn't chronically stressed. So that baby didn't have constant cortisol like
Mhm.
helping his developing brain. So he came out different. And
Yeah.
and realizing that and seeing my children grow, and then realizing how this was effective for me, I was like, oh, I have sensory issues. And my firstborn Michael has sensory issues. For those of you who don't know what sensory issues are, it's like sensory overload. So
Mhm.
that could be like light sensitivity or hearing sensitivity, or textures are a big thing for us, like certain foods and clothing textures are a no. Um, but when Michael would yell,
Mm.
it would trigger me, and I would get in that dysregulated body. And when I was dysregulated, he couldn't calm.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
started doing EMDR with a therapist on, what is this triggering in me from my childhood? What is this bringing up in me? And I was better able to then, when he's screaming, be like in a calm body. Like, I didn't have that
Mm.
chest tightness. So he was able to calm. And then I was like, why am I working with kids? I should be working with parents, because
With moms.
if we can work with the parents, then they can help the kids. And I've worked with kids. I started out with kids. I started out
Mm.
6 and up. And then
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
I got into trauma work, working in a residential treatment center for
Mhm.
uh female teens, but they were like the female teens that were too bad for like the alternative schools. Like, they were placed either through the Department of Justice or
Right.
foster care,
Yeah.
or like out of home placement. A lot of them
Mhm.
lived there. So they
Yeah.
were very traumatized kids. And I loved that work because I was a trauma kid. And then when I became a mom, I was like, oh God, if I could just work with the moms, then we could prevent them all from feeling the way that we felt. And then
So
those moms
great.
have that feeling of guilt of like, oh, I screwed up my kids too, right? Because I
Right.
feel like parents, that's every parent I talk to, that's their biggest fear. I'm gonna mess up my kids.
Oh,
I'm gonna mess them up.
right.
And
Right. Or I'm a bad mom, or because, my kid doesn't want to go to school on time, or, any little thing, right? Suddenly you're like, oh, this means I'm really a terrible mom.
oh yeah, like exactly. And it's not just moms. Like my husband, yesterday morning, my son didn't do his homework the night before. And with his sensory issues, he has fine motor difficulties. So
Mhm.
he's in kindergarten, but it's hard for him to grip a pencil and write. Um, so if he's not in a good window of tolerance, I don't make him do his homework, because it's going to be an explosion, and he's in kindergarten, man. What I'm trying
Yeah.
to do is build the self-confidence for him to just feel confident in school, right? Like, he'll learn his ABCs and he'll learn how to write
Yeah.
eventually.
Mm.
And my husband was like, he didn't do his homework last night. We have to do it this morning. Like, we're gonna look like bad parents. And he had that anxiety of like,
Oh,
and I was like, babe, like, we'll just double up on the homework tomorrow, honey. It's okay. Like, he
yeah.
can just do the homework tonight when he gets home and we'll hand it in on Friday. Like, it's
Good
not
thing
gonna
you're so regulated. You can calm everybody in your household down.
that's a funny thing, Sydney, because what my team will say to me all the time is like, when do you take care of you? Because
Mm,
as much as I preach this, right, and I am a work in progress, guys, we all are.
yeah.
Um, I'm not a perfect human because as much as I'm like, oh yeah, you have to take care of yourself and you need to go to the gym and you need to do this and you need to do that, and you got to put your mask on first to keep taking care of all of these people and be as awesome as you are. I'm gonna tell you, at least like once every 3 months, I fall off the wagon, and my team has to be like, "Hey, girl, you got to feed yourself again. Like, go
Mm,
back to the gym. You fell off. Like, we got
right.
it. Ask for help."
Yeah.
And they nudge me and they prompt me because no one is ever going to be perfect. And I also don't like presenting myself like I'm a perfect human because I'm not. I still have my own struggles. I still get frustrated. I still fall off the self-care wagon, even though I know that it's detrimental. I just get back on quicker, you know?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
all we can aspire for. Like
Getting
progress is
back on.
a straight line up. It is up and it's peaks and valleys and
Right.
that's
We've
what
got
it
to
is.
embrace the messy, we really do.
Yeah.
And it is a strength when we get back up. And you have a really great self-care episode on your podcast where people can listen more to just that description of like what it's like, right? Because we mess up too, or we fall off, or I mean, just like you said, you can go back and tell your team, well, I'll take care of myself once I delegate everything. I mean, so there's some of that. Like it is hard when you have that like, work ethic and you're kind of, workaholic and you've got just multi-passionate, right? Like I'm that way too. And so it's like I want to do all these things. And then the next thing you know, like you said, do you have anxiety? Like yesterday, I was just so anxious and I couldn't even figure out why, right? I had a good day the day before and there was no reason I wasn't going to have a good day, but my nervous system, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes we can't understand it. So for you to share how this EMDR impacted you at such a vulnerable time, 1 month pregnant with your IVF baby, like that's huge. And I love that you're sharing this amazing therapy with so many other moms. It's so great.
My whole team does it now. So we used to
Oh,
call Suffolk Family Therapy. We changed to Long Island EMDR in my New York practice. Because once I was super passionate about it, I wouldn't shut up. So they were all like, okay, I'll take the training. And then we all collectively kind of like trained together and like just talked about how it was affecting our clients. And everyone saw like clients make progress no matter what modality you're using if you're a good therapist. But for us, the difference is really like how quickly they can make that progress. How quickly not only do they get that insight, but then they can actually make the changes. Because I feel like in traditional therapy, from gaining the insight to actually implementing consistently the behavioral changes can take a really, really long time. And we've seen clients that have come for weekly therapy, and it may take them a while to gain the insight enough to get into the EMDR to know what their core beliefs are. But like, 3 months of EMDR, and they're usually like pretty good. I've had clients that have come in and done, only a couple weeks of sessions where we closed out like one target and they're
nice.
already like subclinical on the PCL-5, which measures PTSD, guys. So, it's really, really effective. If you could have someone come in and they're having nightmares and you can desensitize that so, they don't have nightmares moving forward. Like if you can make that big of a change in someone's body, that's amazing. And
Yes. Yeah. Huge
it's
quality of life improvement. And like you said, it's really a therapy that has these embodied changes for your clients, you know.
it's the
As
embodiment. What were you gonna say, Sydney? I'm sorry.
just I wanted to ask you because you said something really important, Jamie, about for many therapists who see EMDR or do a training, right, and it's so protocol based and all of this, they may not really get it or not
It's
completely dive
scary.
into it. It's scary. It's hard. It's, all of that. And you said it's really important to experience it yourself. So I know people listening are going to be like, oh, I like her style. I want to give this a try. I have you're like, what would you advise someone who wants to learn EMDR? And I know there's like the proper type of certification you need, but also to experience the EMDR therapy for themselves. Like, how should somebody do it?
So I would say find an EMDR therapist, right? I don't recommend, there are things that you can find online that you can do self-administered EMDR. I am not a big proponent of that because you don't know what you're going to bring up, and you really need someone skilled enough to wrap you back up and send you out into the world.
Mhm.
What we have to remember too is an EMDR, right? Like, we're going to places in the brain that we have dissociated from a very, very long time. So you
Right.
might remember things or have like insight about things that are really, really difficult for you. And if you don't have another human to then help you work through that, and you're dysregulated, no matter how good of a therapist you are, it's going to be really hard for you to come up with that plan, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
please don't do self-administered EMDR. Find an EMDRIA trained therapist. That is
Andrea,
important.
right.
EMDRIA is important. There are people that are trained through PESI, and it's not the same rigor. It's not the same level. It's not the same at all.
Yeah.
And it is a modality that if not used with caution and skill, can really cause some damage,
Hmm.
because it can bring up a lot of suicidal thoughts, a lot of self-harming thoughts. They don't necessarily recommend full protocol for people that are in early recovery stages of substance abuse,
Hmm.
because it can be a relapse. So you want to really just make sure that you're going to someone who's skilled and is going to send you back into the world better than you came in, not worse.
Yeah.
So emdria.org to find a good therapist. I would also say just like listen to a good podcast on EMDR is Zero Disturbance.
Mm,
Cambria runs Zero Disturbance. I love listening to Cambria. Would love to meet her one day. But yeah, she runs Zero Disturbance, and she talks about how good EMDR is for everything. And she's really
great.
passionate about EMDR as not just for trauma, but as like to help us just make more positive connections in our brain, because our brains
Mm,
are so wired to be like, what's the problem, right? For survival, that if we can help train our brains to be like, oh, what's going right, and focus more on the things that are going right, we can strengthen all those positive things that we want to feel about ourselves, right? We can focus on all
yes.
the experiences that make us feel like I'm a great mom and I'm a great therapist and I'm a great friend, instead of all the micro things that are like, I'm okay, I'm a bad mom because they rolled their eyes, so now they hate me, right? They hate me,
Right.
and we can
And
master
there's
that.
the anxiety spiral right there, right? And so, yeah, Jamie, that's like so key. If we can increase those micro positive moments and things that we focus on and get our brains into that warm, lit up place so much more.
And EMDR isn't just about like going back in the past and dragging yourself through it, right? It's also about like coming up with like future templates of how you want to see yourself, and what are some experiences in your life where you truly embodied like I am worthy, or
Mhm.
I am important, or I matter, right? Like, when is a time in your life you really felt like that, and let's strengthen the connection with that, so that
Mhm.
we recognize that more during the day. And just like you pick up on all those things that trigger those negative core beliefs, your brain's going to start picking up on all those things that are going to reinforce those positive beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a little different about our practice, is because we don't do first or worst. That's not the way that we go into EMDR, which is how most people are trained. Because I do feel like if you have really, really hard experiences that you've been through in your life, to do the first one or the worst one, if
Ooh,
that's your first experience with EMDR, that's fucking terrifying, guys.
right.
Like, you're
Yeah.
going to be 10, your whole body's going to be dysregulated. I don't want to introduce it to clients like that. I'm like, all right, let's pick something we're at like a 5, and I'm going to get you down to like a 1 or a 0, and then you have some buy-in, right? And then the client's like,
Exactly.
then the
Right.
client's like, oh, okay, I feel so much better. And they're willing to do that deeper, harder stuff because they can tell that there's going to be a payoff.
Exactly. We have to have some wins, and you can just see like what an expert therapist you are, right? Like being able to manage that tolerance and to give the client some wins and the buy-in, and who wouldn't want that to even have five and then be able to drop down to zero, right? In
Oh God, it's
40
amazing.
minutes. Yeah, amazing.
For most of us walking around in chronically stressed bodies, right? If we can take that, like if our anxiety is normally at an 8, and we can even bring it down to like a 3 or a 4, heck, like if you can do 3 days with somebody and bang all that out so that maybe you're not at a 0, you're still going to be bothered sometimes, but you're going to be bothered at a level of a 4, which feels more like a fly you're swatting away than like an elephant sitting on your chest, like that is
Exactly.
marked difference in your functioning level
Mm,
every day after. And that's the beautiful part about EMDR to me, like the rapidness of change and the physiology of that change. It's not just like it doesn't take as much mental energy to keep focusing on like I'm going to try to be positive. I'm going to focus on all the things I can be grateful for. Like that's energy, that's effort. If your brain can just go to all the things you're grateful for, girl, you won't feel so much better.
yeah, right. And then it's that embodied place, like it's part of you.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and I love that the EMDR, as you propose, it doesn't have to just be for trauma, right? So if you were having like a struggle with something else, with a friend or with a partner or with your business, I don't know which direction to go, you could bring that as a topic to EMDR, correct?
Oh, for sure. I've done EMDR on business owners who have terrible imposter syndrome, and just help them like to strengthen all of the positive connections, all the things they've overcome, and how they truly are an expert in all the ways that they've succeeded, so that they don't feel like they're a fraud anymore
Mm,
in their bodies, not just in their
yeah,
brains. That's the difference.
right.
Um, and in your relationships, right? Like when we think about people pleasers, if we go back to them people pleasers, if we're not asking for what we need, we're going to chronically feel like our feelings and needs don't matter because our needs and feelings are never validated or met, right?
They're never seen.
They're
Exactly.
never ever seen. But the anxiety about asking for that help, right? If you go to ask your spouse or your parent or a boss or colleague or whoever for help and you're at an 8, I mean, I've been there, guys. Like I've
Mhm.
wanted to talk to my dad specifically about things and told my therapist, like, yeah, I'm gonna do it this week. Yeah, I'm gonna do it this week. Yeah, I'm gonna have that conversation. But every time I got on the phone, I just felt like I was gonna like ugh, my whole body got tight, my chest hurt. It felt like I
Mm.
couldn't even speak. And doing EMDR made it so that I was no longer at an 8 and I was
Wow.
uncomfortable. I was at a 4, but I was able to get the words out and have the conversation and then allow for him to validate and make me feel better and make the changes so that I
Oh,
continue to feel that way.
oh, how
And
nice.
that's what we're working on. It's not taking everything away. It's not a cure-all. It's not gonna remove all the stress in your life. Like if that's what you're looking for, there's no answer to that. Life is always just
Exactly.
kind of stressful, guys.
Right.
But how to like advocate for yourself and get your needs met. Every stressor doesn't feel like a fire.
Yeah.
It's just like it feels like, oh, okay, there's a stress, and now I can go into solution mode, and now that's solved, and I can move on with my day and leave it alone. But
Yeah.
when
To
we're
have that equanimity would be amazing, right? To not always be putting out the fires. And I know, Jamie, so many people are going to listen to this and think, "Oh, I wish I could work with her." And you're only doing intensives for new clients now, right? You have to be
yeah,
in New
so
York, right? New York.
we have to be in New York. What we are doing is we can have people fly in and set them up in like a nice hotel with a spa and all the things, and we can go to them.
Oh,
I honestly really recommend for anyone who has the time and has a specific issue, if you know what you want to work on, what you want to change, what makes that body discomfort really uncomfortable, and you're like, this is what I want to rid my life of, right? If you know what that is and you have the time and the finances to bang that out, I really recommend doing an intensive, whether it's me or someone else that does intensives in your area.
Sure.
Because when we do weekly therapy, right? If you think about it, if you've been sexually abused or had a parent die by suicide, or like really, like people have been through hard things, guys, like been in war zones, like a refugee, like, you know, if you're going through hard stuff and you have to open that up, right? You're going to meet with your therapist. Think about how many of us go and meet with our therapist on our lunch break. And then we go right back into the world, right? Your
It
brain
doesn't
is not
integrate. It doesn't integrate.
doesn't integrate, and your brain's not going to allow you to think about those horrible deep, like your worst moments, and go right back into the day. I know my brain won't.
Mhm.
I've tried it,
It's a
and
really great way to talk about intensives and why they can be so powerful.
yeah, because
Yeah.
think about that. So you're either going back to work, or like,
Mhm.
let's just even say it's after work. Okay, so you get off of work, you go meet with your therapist for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. But you also know, okay, I know for me, before I even leave the office, I'm like, I got to go home. I got to pick up the kids. I got to make dinner. I got to give them baths. I got to do all these things. So again, you're not going to let yourself really collapse and be vulnerable and put it all on the
Yeah.
table, because you got to be back on in an hour
Exactly.
and a half. So if
Right.
you can take the time to give yourself no responsibilities and an actual like few days to just focus on you and what you need so you can go deep without feeling like the world is going to crumble,
Hmm.
I highly recommend it, because it's just as effective as a year's worth of therapy. They've done studies
Hmm.
like a year out, and it's just as effective, guys. So if you have the time and the money, heck, fly out here. We'd be happy to
Yeah,
see.
that's
Um,
great. Tell
Long Island
everyone,
is
Jamie,
beautiful.
what's that?
Long Island is beautiful.
Yes, Long
Beaches.
Island. That's right. Show some New York love. So, I mean, this is really exciting. Tell everyone where they can find out more about um, your practices. I mean, we want to know the whole thing, like your websites and all of that.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to edit it out again, Sydney, because I have to pull out that I didn't prep. Hold on. I have to
Oh,
pull
okay,
out the
that's
worksheet.
fine. That's fine. Yeah, I didn't do that very skillfully anyhow. So,
You did
um,
it very skillfully. I'm
no.
just ill prepared. It's okay. It's not on you.
Do you want to talk about your podcast?
I don't know. So they
Okay.
want me to talk about this like pop-up podcast that I'm supposed to do and market people to. Um,
Okay. I think we're good with, sorry, Sarah, we're just talking here. I think we're good with the EMDR thing. Like I think that's really good. So
we can move on, and I can
yeah.
say we're supposed to be doing a, let me pull up the link for it, Levy. And then I can tell you, because what we are offering is a free like 3 day.
So, Jamie, I just am so grateful that you could spend time with us today in the middle of an intensive to take a break and share with my listeners your joy, your passion for EMDR, for therapy, for life that just is so clear that it comes through in your warmth and your desire to help people, and especially to help moms and parents so that they don't feel like imposters, so that they can see that they are really good at who they are and what they're doing. And it's just been so refreshing to hear about this and to get excited about EMDR on so many levels. So thank you again. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners where people can find you, the Long Island EMDR therapy website and all of that.
Thank you, Sydney. It's been a really great talk. I've loved every minute of it. So you can find us at www.liemdr.com. We will also have a pop-up workshop coming up there that will focus on exploring your beliefs and the messages you got through society and your family that contribute to maybe why you don't feel good enough or feel like an imposter, as well as like some tips and strategies on like how to set clear boundaries and communicate, and what to do if that's not working, right? So you can find that on our website at www.liemdr.com. You can also give us a call at 631 503-1539. And if you're located in Missouri, you can actually get some EMDR therapy over at Brave Counseling and Psychiatry as well. They are www.brave-mo.com. And their number is 573-825-6441.
Oh, awesome. This is real life. We are giving you phone numbers here too. And everything will be in the show notes as well. And don't forget to also check out her podcast, Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. And yes, Jamie, this has been great. I look forward to another chance to talk to you more. I think our next shared episode will be about entrepreneurship and maybe for folks who are interested in starting group practice. So stay tuned for that.
I'm excited for that, Sydney. Thank you so much for having me on today. I adore
Awesome.
your show and your listeners. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Okay.